places in this world where civilization just stops. Not gradually, but like someone drew a line in the dirt and said, beyond this, you're on your own. I learned that lesson in the worst way possible in summer of 2019, and what I'm about to tell you still makes my hands shake when I think about it. Some people say going off the grid is freedom. They're wrong. Sometimes, going off the grid means going where things that shouldn't exist are waiting. My name is Trevor, and back then, I was 26 and stupid enough to think isolation sounded romantic. I'd bought 40 acres of forested land in northern Idaho, the kind of place where your nearest neighbor is 12 miles away and cell service is a distant memory. The property came with a half-collapsed cabin that I planned to rebuild. For 3 weeks, it was perfect. I'd wake up to birdsong, spend my days hammering and sawing, and fall asleep to absolute silence. The kind of silence that swallows sound. But on the 4th week, the silence changed. It started with the feeling of being watched. You know that prickling sensation on the back of your neck. I'd be working on the roof, and suddenly my whole body would tense up. I'd spin around and see nothing but trees. Dense, ancient pines that seemed to press closer every time I looked away. I told myself it was paranoia. When you're alone that long, your mind plays tricks. Except my mind wasn't playing tricks. The first real sign came on a Tuesday evening. I was inside the cabin, eating a can of beans by lamplight, when I heard it. Footsteps outside. Not animal footsteps. Human footsteps. Slow, deliberate, circling the cabin. My fork clattered against the can. I grabbed my flashlight and went to the window, but the beam only caught trees and darkness. The footsteps stopped the moment I looked. I stood there for 10 minutes, barely breathing, but heard nothing else. That night, I slept with my hunting knife under my pillow. The next day, I found the circle. About 30 yards from the cabin, someone, or something, had arranged stones in a perfect circle, maybe 8 feet across. Inside the circle were bones. Small ones, like from rabbits or squirrels, laid out in a pattern I couldn't understand. My stomach dropped. I was 12 miles from anyone, and someone had done this. Unless it wasn't someone. I kicked the stones apart and went back inside, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made a terrible mistake. That night, it came to my door. I was lying in my sleeping bag, drifting off, when I heard breathing outside the window. Wet, rattling breaths, like someone with fluid in their lungs. My eyes snapped open. The breathing moved along the wall, following the length of the cabin. Then came the scratching. Long, slow drags against the wood, like nails or claws. My heart was hammering so hard I thought my ribs would crack. I wanted to look. God help me. Part of me needed to see what was out there, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, listening to that thing circle my cabin for what felt like hours. When morning finally came, I found the marks. Deep gouges in the wood, running parallel for lines like fingers. But they were too long, too deep. Whatever made them was strong. I packed a bag right then and there. I was leaving. Screw the cabin, screw the property, I was done. But my truck wouldn't start. I turned the key over and over, but it just clicked uselessly. I popped the hood and my blood went cold. Someone had ripped out the battery cables. Not cut them, ripped them, like they'd torn them out with their bare hands. I was trapped. That day was the longest of my life. I boarded up the windows from inside, piled furniture against the door, and waited. The sun seemed to set faster than it should have. As darkness fell, I heard it again. The footsteps, closer this time, then the breathing, right outside the door. I gripped my knife so hard my knuckles went white. The door handle started to turn, slowly testing it. The furniture I'd piled up groaned as something pushed from the other side. Then it spoke. Trevor. My name in a voice that sounded like wine through a rotted tree. Trevor, open the door. It knew my name. It knew my name. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood, trying not to scream. The pushing stopped. Footsteps moved to the window. I heard sniffing, like a dog tracking a scent. Then I saw it through the gaps in the boards, a face, if you could call it that. Too pale, too long, with eyes that reflected my lamplight like an animal's. But the expression was human. It was smiling. "I can wait," it said. And it did. All night, I heard it circling, scratching, breathing. Sometimes it would go quiet for an hour, and I'd think it was gone. But then the footsteps would start again. By dawn, I was barely sane. The moment I saw sunlight through the cracks, I grabbed my bag and ran. I didn't care about the truck. I ran through those woods for 6 hours straight, following the old logging road, until I finally hit the highway and flagged down a passing car. I never went back for my things. I sold the property through a lawyer and took a massive loss. The new owners, they lasted 3 weeks before they abandoned it too. The realtor told me they found something in the woods, another circle of stones, bigger this time, with bones arranged inside. Human bones, they said, though the police never confirmed it. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear that voice. Trevor, just my name, whispered in the dark. I'll bolt awake, heart racing, sure that something's outside my window. I live in downtown Seattle now, surrounded by people and lights and noise. I'm safe here, I tell myself. But I don't really believe it, because whatever was in those woods, whatever knew my name, I don't think it was bound to that place. I think I brought it with me, and I think, sooner or later, it's going to finish what it started. If you've ever driven the Alaska highway at night, you know what real darkness looks like. Not the kind you get in suburbs, with streetlights bleeding through your curtains. I'm talking about darkness so complete it feels like you're driving through ink. That's where I was in October 2020. And that's where I met something that proved some places are abandoned for a reason. My name's Rachel, and I was 28 when this happened. I was driving from Fairbanks to Whitehorse, a route I'd done twice before, always during the day. But my mom had a medical emergency, and I left at 4 p.m. without thinking about the fact that I'd be driving through the night. By midnight, I was running on fumes, literally. My gas light had been on for 20 miles, and I was starting to panic when I saw it. A gas station, impossibly, at mile 89. I say impossibly because I'd driven this route before, and there was no station at mile 89. But there it was, lit up like Christmas. An old-style pump station with a small attached building. The sign said Last Chance Gas in flickering neon. I pulled in, so relieved I almost cried. The place looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. Ancient pumps, a building with dim windows, and absolutely no other cars. But beggars can't be choosers. I got out, and the cold hit me like a wall. It was bitter, the kind that burned your lungs, but something else was wrong. The air smelled weird, like metal and something sweet, that made my stomach turn. The gas pumps had no credit card readers, just a sign saying pay inside. Great. I tried the door to the building, and it swung open with a creak that set my teeth on edge. Inside was a convenience store frozen in time. Shelves stocked with products I didn't recognize. Brands that looked decades old. A single fluorescent light buzzed overhead, flickering every few seconds. Behind the counter was a man. At least, I think it was a man. He stood perfectly still, staring at nothing, wearing a uniform that looked rotted with age. His skin was gray, almost translucent, and his eyes were clouded over like a dead fish. "Hi," I said, my voice cracking. "I need to pay for gas." He didn't move, didn't blink. I stood there for what felt like 5 minutes, but was probably 30 seconds, before he slowly turned his head toward me. The movement was wrong, too smooth, like his neck was on a swivel. When he smiled, I saw that his teeth were black. "How much?" His voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. $40. I fumbled for my wallet, not wanting to look at him. I slapped 2 20s on the counter. He stared at the money like he didn't know what it was, then slowly reached out and took it. His fingers were too long. That's what I remember most clearly. Fingers that seemed to have too many joints. "Pump 3, he said, still smiling that awful smile. I practically ran back outside. The cold air felt like a blessing compared to the atmosphere in that building. I started pumping gas, watching the numbers climb, when I noticed something that made my blood freeze. My car was the only one here, but there were other pumps running. Pumps 2 and 4 were both displaying active transactions, the numbers spinning up, but there were no cars attached to them. Gas was just pouring onto the ground, forming puddles that reflected the neon sign. I looked back at the building. The clerk was standing at the window, watching me. Not just looking in my general direction, watching me. His dead eyes locked onto mine. I wanted to run, to jump in my car and floor it, but I was terrified of what would happen if I left with the pump still running. So I waited, every second feeling like an hour, until the pump clicked off at exactly $40. I holstered the pump with shaking hands and got in my car. The engine turned over, thank God, and I started to pull away when I heard it, a tapping on my window. I screamed and looked. It was the clerk, somehow outside, standing next to my car. He shouldn't have been able to get there that fast. The building was 50 feet away. "You forgot your receipt," he said through the glass, holding up a slip of paper. I shook my head violently and hit the gas. As I pulled away, I looked in my rearview mirror. He was standing in the middle of the road, getting smaller as I drove, but never taking his eyes off me. The gas station lights flickered once, twice, and then went completely dark. When I looked back again, there was nothing there. Just empty highway and darkness. I drove until dawn, barely breathing, my hands welded to the steering wheel. When the sun came up, I pulled over at a real gas station, a modern one with other customers and a teenager working the register who looked blessedly normal. I told him about the station at mile 89. He gave me a weird look. "There's no gas station at mile 89, he said. "There used to be one there, back in the 70s, but it burned down, killed the owner and his son. They say it was arson, but they never caught who did it." I pulled up photos on my phone, satellite images of the highway. He was right. At mile 89, there was nothing but empty land and the foundation of an old building. No gas station. No last chance gas. Nothing. But my tank was full. And when I finally worked up the courage to check my bank statement, there was a charge for exactly $40 from a place listed as Last Chance Petroleum Services. The transaction was dated October 15th, 1978. I took a different route back to Fairbanks. I'll never drive the Alaska Highway at night again, because sometimes the places we think we find are actually finding us. And I'm terrified that one day I'll be low on gas at the wrong time, in the wrong place, and I'll see those neon lights again. And next time, I don't think I'll be allowed to leave. People always ask me why I don't go hiking anymore, why I won't even drive through national forests. I tell them I'm just not outdoorsy. That's a lie. The truth is, I know what lives in the deep woods, the places where humans aren't supposed to be. I learned that in the summer of 2018, and it changed me in ways I'm still trying to understand. My name is Brandon, and I was 32 when I decided to rent a cabin in the Cascade Mountains for a week. It was supposed to be a reset. I'd just gone through a brutal divorce, and my therapist suggested solitude might help. I found a listing on some obscure rental site. A cabin 20 miles from the nearest town, accessible only by a rough dirt road. No internet, barely any cell service. Perfect, I thought. The owner met me at the trailhead to hand over the keys. His name was Ernest, a man in his 70s with a face like weathered leather. As he gave me directions, he said something that should have been a red flag. Don't go walking after dark. And if you hear knocking at night, don't answer. Don't even look. Just ignore it and it'll go away. I laughed, thinking he was playing up the spooky, isolated cabin vibe for effect. He didn't laugh back. He just stared at me with this dead serious expression and repeated, "Don't answer the knocking." Then he got in his truck and left me there. The first 2 days were exactly what I needed. The cabin was rustic but comfortable, surrounded by massive Douglas firs that blocked out most of the sunlight. I spent my time reading, journaling, taking short walks. It was quiet, almost too quiet. I'm used to city noise, sirens and traffic and people. Here, the silence was so profound it felt like a physical presence. On the third night, the knocking started. I was reading by lamplight around 11 p.m. when I heard it. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the front door. Boom, boom, boom. I froze, my book falling into my lap. There was no one else around. The nearest cabin was 15 miles away. I sat there, barely breathing, and the knocking came again. 3 times, evenly spaced, patient. I remembered Ernest's warning, but curiosity is a powerful thing. I crept to the window and peeked through the curtain. Nothing, just darkness and trees. The porch light was off. I'd forgotten to turn it on. The knocking came a 3rd time, and now it sounded insistent, almost angry. My rational brain said it was an animal, maybe a branch falling against the door. But 3 evenly spaced knocks. That's not an animal. That's deliberate. I didn't answer. I went back to my chair and pretended to read, though the words swam meaninglessly in front of my eyes. After about 10 minutes, the knocking stopped. I exhaled slowly, my hands trembling. I'd done what Ernest said. I ignored it. Everything would be fine. Except that night, I had the dream. I was standing outside the cabin, in the woods, watching myself through the window. I could see me sitting in the chair, reading, oblivious. And standing next to Dreamy, in the darkness just beyond the trees, was something tall. Impossibly tall, maybe 8 or 9 feet, with arms too long and a head that seemed to tilt at the wrong angle. It was watching me too. In the dream, it started walking toward the cabin, and I wanted to scream to warn myself, but I had no voice. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. It was just past 3 a.m., and the cabin was freezing. I could see my breath. That's when I noticed my front door was open. Not wide open, just cracked a few inches, like someone had pushed it but not walked through. I knew I'd locked it. I specifically remembered checking it after the knocking. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, my hand shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. I crept toward the door and shined the light outside. There, in the dirt of the porch, were footprints. Bare footprints, human-shaped but elongated, with toes that seemed to spread too far apart. They led from the door to the edge of the porch, then vanished. Just stopped, like whatever made them had jumped or been lifted away. I slammed the door shut and shoved a chair under the handle. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat with my back against the wall, watching the door, until sunlight finally crept through the windows. In the morning, I inspected the footprints again. They were still there, undeniably real. I tried to tell myself someone was messing with me, but I was 20 miles from anyone. Who would drive out here just to knock on my door and leave weird footprints? I should have left then. God, I should have packed up and driven straight out. But I told myself I was being paranoid. It was broad daylight. Nothing bad happens in daylight, right? That afternoon, I decided to take a hike to clear my head. There was a trail that led to a small waterfall about 2 miles from the cabin. I followed it, grateful for the sunlight filtering through the trees, the sound of birds and wind. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. I reached the waterfall and sat on a rock, just breathing, trying to rationalize everything. That's when I saw it. Across the water, standing motionless in the tree line, was the thing from my dream. I couldn't process what I was seeing. It was too tall, too thin, its proportions all wrong. Its skin was pale, almost luminescent in the shadows, and its face, Jesus Christ. Its face was almost human, but not quite. The eyes were too large, too dark, and its mouth hung open slightly, like it was tasting the air. It was looking directly at me. We stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. My body was screaming at me to run, but I couldn't move. Then, slowly, deliberately, it raised one impossibly long arm and pointed at me. Just pointed, holding the gesture. And then it knocked 3 times on a tree trunk. The same rhythm from the night before. Boom, boom, boom. That broke the spell. I ran. I crashed through the woods, branches tearing at my clothes and face, my lungs burning. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I ran all the way to the cabin, fumbled with the door, threw myself inside, and locked everything. Doors, windows, everything. My phone had maybe 10% battery and 1 bar of service. I tried calling 911, but the call wouldn't go through. Night fell fast. Too fast. And right at 11 p.m., the knocking started again. 3 slow, patient knocks. This time, I heard something else, a voice, low and rasping, speaking words I didn't understand. It sounded like it was right outside the door, inches away. The chair I'd wedged under the handle started to rattle. Whatever was out there was testing it, pushing gently. Then the knocking moved to the windows. All of them, one after another, circling the cabin. Knock, knock, knock at the front. Knock, knock, knock on the side. Knock, knock, knock at the back. It was surrounding me, showing me it could reach every part of the cabin. The voice got louder, more insistent, still in that language I couldn't comprehend. I huddled in the corner with a kitchen knife, tears streaming down my face, praying for sunrise. Around 4 a.m., everything went silent. The knocking stopped. The voice stopped. I waited another hour before I dared to move. As soon as I saw the first hint of dawn, I threw everything in my bag and ran to my car. I drove down that dirt road going 50 miles an hour, not caring about the bumps and rocks. When I finally hit paved highway, I pulled over and vomited. I called Ernest from the first gas station I found. I told him what happened. There was a long pause, and then he said, "You didn't answer the knocking, did you?" "No," I said. "I didn't." "Good. That's why you're still alive." The last person who rented that cabin answered on the second night. We found him 3 days later, 5 miles into the woods. He'd walked there barefoot in the middle of the night. The coroner said he'd been dead for hours, but his legs kept walking until they finally gave out. He paused, and I heard him take a shaky breath. "If it knocked for you, it knows you now. It might come back. If it does, if you ever hear that knocking again, no matter where you are, don't answer. Don't acknowledge it. And whatever you do, don't let it inside." I hung up and drove straight home. A 12-hour drive I did without stopping except for gas. That was 5 years ago. I've moved twice since then, always to populated areas, always to places with lots of light and noise. But sometimes, late at night, when the world gets quiet, I hear it. 3 slow knocks. Boom, boom, boom. And I know it's still looking for me, still waiting for me to answer. I never will, but I'm not sure it matters anymore, because the worst part isn't the knocking. It's that sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I see it standing behind me for just a split second before it vanishes. And I'm terrified that one day, I'm going to turn around, and it's going to be real. That's when I'll know I'm out of time.